I just want to pick your brain, being the person that you are and the insight that you have, to kind of, again, just get me over the hump into the EV world, so to speak.
I'm very likely to fail, but I'm very used to it. It's a conversation I'm very used to.
I'm sure you got me. Don't you worry. I'm not too hard to motivate. All right. Without further ado, let's just get into it then. So, like I said, I am a full-blown petrolhead. It actually started when I was 17, 18. I wasn't really into cars until I got my first car. And it was thanks to my dad and myself. I saved up all my graduation money. My dad kind of met me in the middle. And and at the time, I mean, I was top dog in my mind, at least. Whether it was like first dates or racing and driving on the speed limit with friends. I just felt like the man, like you had the sports car, you just turned 18. I just got my license. But like I said, now that I'm a bit older, I got my big boy job. I moved out of the US into the Netherlands. I wanted to make a change both from a sustainability perspective, but also from mobility perspective. And with car sharing and all this stuff going on in the Netherlands, I was like, oh, why not get an EV? But there's some half stereotype, some half my nostalgia to get back into the petrol side of things that is stopping me from that pursuit, so to speak. And like I said, I want to know from your side, were you ever a petroholic? I feel like we all were in some sense because there wasn't an option. Yeah. But were you a petroholic, and to what degree were you a petroholic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably quite an extreme case, I guess. I mean, so I grew up as a child quite near Silverstone motor racing circuit. So that was a thing that I would cycle there with my brother. So my brother is 3 years older than me and he's retired now, but was a Formula One engineer. He helped build Formula One cars. So he was right in that world. And I think it's fairly fair to say that Formula One is a fairly petrol-based sport. But I mean, amazing technology and amazing stuff. And he wasn't a driver. He was a mechanic and an engineer working behind the scenes, but spent most of his career. So I've had that link to that world all my life. So I learnt to drive at about the age of 11 in a go-kart that my brother, basically, he built it. It used a lawnmower engine. From an old lawnmower, but the only problem was that the lawnmower was still in use by my father. So when my father came back from work and saw that his precious lawnmower was in bits and we'd put the engine on them, we learned some new words that day. But that that evolved into then being into cars and driving and racing. When I saw the noise and the passion and the kind of emotion of very, very loud racing cars is, I'm still affected by it. It doesn't, even though I've got plenty of reasons to criticize it, I actually think that is fantastic. I don't ever want that to stop because it's of no relevance from the point of view of air quality, pollution, climate change. It's like a few cars going around a track on a Saturday. Shut up. It's fine. It's not doing any doubt. It's not really doing any harm at all. But then I did definitely. So I'm definitely you're probably older than your parents, but your parents' generation. So I was a proper, full-blown, sit on my own hair because it was so long hippie, and I went to Amsterdam in the 1970s, and for lots of reasons, and I rode bikes, and I definitely went off cars at that time because cars then represented bourgeois consumerism. Environmental stupidity, and just didn't make sense because all I ever witnessed of cars was massive traffic jams, or very, very common at that time, huge queues of petrol cars with their engines running, waiting to go to a filling station where there was no fuel because we had the fuel shortage in the early 1970s, which is kind of when I left home and became something resembling an adult. So that had a really big effect on me. I just thought this doesn't work. This technology is just dead. And I did think we wouldn't have cars by like 1980. And that shows how utterly deluded I was. Like, capitalism is finished, man. It's just going to be an egalitarian, organic, ethical society from now on. That didn't quite happen. But so I didn't own a car until I was in my, I think, yes, I didn't own a car till I was in my sort of early 20s, but I actually lived in a furniture truck, an old truck, basically, a big truck, 3.5, nearly 4 tons, with a petrol engine. So you can imagine the fuel economy in that was funny, laughable. And I lived in that for 3 years. And that's what I'm trying to find the picture of me sitting in the back of that. But that was a way of solving the housing crisis that I was in, because I had no money and no rent, couldn't find anywhere to live. And, suddenly had somewhere that was really my own. First time I had somewhere that was mine. And that was life-changing, because I learned to be basically to be responsible, to be a basic mechanic to keep the thing going, because it was always breaking down, to keep tidy, because you couldn't live in a space that small and be untidy. You had to learn to put things away and wipe things down and put, otherwise you just learned to do that. So that was a really amazing learning experience. Traveled all over the world. In fact, drove all over the Netherlands in that truck, and went all over the place. North Germany, bit of France, bit of Belgium, but mainly in the UK. We were traveling around there, and it was a real life-changing experience. So that was from the age of sort of 20 to 23. I lived in that truck. So that was my first car, and it was petrol. And you're right, there was no alternative, and I didn't really think about it. And then I think there was a long gap where life just took over. I had a series of cars. When I lived in London for 14 years and didn't have a car, because it was such a pain in the ass to have one in London, to insure it, to tax it, to have it tested every year, to park it. It was just a nightmare. So I got rid of it. I used a bike and public transport, and it was fine. I didn't miss it. And then about a year before I moved out of London, I think when would that have been? Yeah, about a year before I moved out, I did buy another car. And then since then, I've lived outside in a rural area, where if you don't have a car, it's a really long bike ride with really big hills to the nearest shop. It's not like the Netherlands. It's just, we're at the top of quite a big hill. So I can go anywhere on a bike really easily. It's just coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
Massive pain in the ass. But yeah, so I was conflicted, because I loved them. I loved, powerful cars. When I first went to the United States, I remember standing on the balcony of my friend's house that was in upstate New York, but it was right next to a very big, busy road. And I just listened to the V8s. I got this enormous, oh my God, that's a proper American V8. And they had they had some stoplights about 100 yards from their house. So every now and then you hear, there's some ridiculous V8 thing rumbled up the road, and I can remember that was the first night I spent in the United States. I was listening to V8s because I was so enthralled of them. So I had that in me.
I like you said, I can absolutely relate. We had this thing, and I'm originally from Maryland. We had this thing in our hometown called Senior Week. Everybody goes to the beach, and they co-align this with high school seniors, just got their license, just graduated, gonna make bad decisions, and they completely endorse it, right? They're like just all in. So not only that, but they had this other thing called H2O, which is a car show that same week.
Right.
So, I think thousands of kids from all over the state come by, and in the middle of all of this, everything that you said that happened in the 70s and 80s still going, queues down the road. It's just one long strip of beach and road. Right. So it's just, you see the GTRs, you see the Audi A3s and the supercharged, you see the supercharged Hyundai Civics or Honda Civics with the muffler in the back that's louder than your, the truck in front of it.
Yeah.
And for me, that was my moment. I was like, man, I don't know. I can't see anything outside of this world, so to speak, because whether it was drivability or the nostalgia of the windows down and you're blasting your favorite song, there was nothing that would ever compare to that in that regard, right? I'm sure you had issues here and there where you're just
all the time. Yeah. No, it was absolutely a regular thing, and that you sort of forget. And also that thing where, like, for instance, now I will hear from lots of people who would like to get an electric car, and they say, I can't afford it. And I'm going, I couldn't afford. I had like fifth-hand cars, not second-hand. Second-hand was like, I'd met some people who had second-hand, like rich people who had second-hand cars. Mine were like on their knees. They were just broken down wrecks. That's what I could afford. And they were constantly going wrong and breaking down and fixing them, all that stuff. And it was really only when I was in my 50s that I actually that was the first time I bought a new car, was a Prius of all things. Which is a strange thing. I had you'll know this car, a Volkswagen Golf R32.
Oh, of course.
That was my last sort of proper petrolhead car, and my brother was a good friend of a German engineer who had worked for Volkswagen and who worked in high performance cars, like you've been talking about, like the sort of, and he re-chipped it for me, and I didn't really even know what that meant. I knew once he'd done it, I knew what it meant, but before he'd done it, I also didn't realize that it immediately broke the second-hand value of that car. Well, it was a second-hand, but it was fairly new. It was a fairly new car, so it completely ruined the value of it because it had been re-chipped, which is you're not meant to do. And he broke open the seal, but he knew how to do it. It worked brilliantly. It never went wrong, and it was terrifying after he re-chipped it. And it was also a very strong memory as I drove to the Toyota dealership about 40 miles away from where I live. Mm-hmm. To trade that car in and get the Prius, and I did about 15 miles to the gallon in a Golf.
Oh my gosh!
That's the difference it made. It just drank petrol. I mean, it was, if you wanted to go very fast, it was extremely good at that. But oh my God, that was crazy. And when I drove home in the Prius, I managed 71 miles to the gallon on the way home. So that was quite a big. That was a kind of shift, definitely, where I went, I think it's time to move on from silly cars. So I did have some, that was the silliest, really, the R32, but it did make a lot of noise. But at the time, I had two young children, about, I guess they would have been 13 and 10, and they hated that car because one time I sat in the back when my wife was driving, it was so noisy because there's huge exhaust right underneath the seats, just such an uncomfortable and noisy car if you weren't in the front. But anyway, crazy thing. But yeah, so I think there's no point me trying to deny my petrolhead past, and I also had Land Rovers. I had Land Rover Defenders because my excuse was we live in a rural area and the roads are really difficult. You can drive along our roads in a low slung Honda Civic tuned up with fluorescent lights coming out the bottom. You'd be fine. The roads aren't that bad. But yeah, so that was my long history, and I think it certainly changed for me when I was working in California. So in 2000 to 2000 and when would it have been 5, 6, I was regularly working in Los Angeles on a show called Junkyard Wars, which was an American version of a British show that I did for 10 years called Scrap Heap Challenge, which is an engineering challenge show like reality TV. Two teams have to make a machine out of the stuff they find on a junkyard.
That's awesome.
And it was great fun. It was a really good fun. But while I was in California, I met all these people who were, we'd have a lot of really skilled engineers as team members on the show. And some of those were working on, they would tell me, I said, what are you doing? I work on electric drivetrains, or I work on battery management systems. And it meant nothing. I work on battery packaging. Oh God, how boring! Aren't you race tuning 5-liter V8s? What's happening? But so that was a kind of clue that there was something going on. And this is really early 2000. That was where I first had a ride in a Prius, which I thought was the weirdest thing ever. Why would you bother to make one? And that was the original version of the Prius. Have you ever seen it?
Oh yeah,
it's the dullest, most boring looking car ever. But I was just intrigued. I didn't know why they did it. And so then I found out, like, completely the other way around. They did it because there's a mandate in California to try and clean up the air. And it was kids your age at school in California really suffering if they were at a school near a big freeway.
Oh, yeah.
Academically, they just didn't have a hope. They were ill. They all had asthma. It was before you were born. The first time I went to LA, I thought I'd caught some really bad virus on the plane because I couldn't breathe and my eyes were stinging. And I was told, no, that's just normal.
Yes, it is. Everybody was like, oh, you'll get used to it. Just like in and out and like, probably not.
It was bad. I mean, that first, like mid-1980s, air there was shocking. Even by, in this country was not much better, but it wasn't as bad. Los Angeles specifically was because there were so many cars. And so many cars with huge engines and no catalytic converters, leaded petrol, all those things, that now would be crazy, if you think about it. But it was just, that was normal then. Yeah, I had a Dodge. I rented a Dodge Challenger from Hollywood Rent-A-Wreck, which was the real name of the company. And they were in West Hollywood, and the guys there just said, just have the Honda. They're really reliable. I said, no, I've never driven one of these. And this thing had a flat tire. They couldn't get it going. God. The electric windows didn't work. You had, when you lifted them up, you had to put a piece of wood on the inside to hold the window up. Otherwise, it just slammed down. A wreck. But my God, it did start. And when we got the tire fixed, I had to keep stopping to pump up the tire as often as I bought gas. But that was absolute joy for a British bloke to drive one of those stupid. God, it couldn't go around corners. It was brilliant in a straight line. But up in the Hollywood Hills, where I had friends stay, I would be having to go around corner going, oh God, it won't turn. They were not built for cornering, those big old 60s lumps. It was a monster. But it did twist the whole, if you revved it at the red light, the whole bonnet, you could just see, whoosh, it would do that. Okay, my God, that's just crazy.
It hits your soul, man. It hits your soul.
It was a double bed with a truck engine. That's what it was like.
Yeah. Exactly. We were, and I think that's the same thing that still happens now. Because when I was in, same thing, I was in Miami for like a music festival, 2018 or 2019.
Yeah.
And everybody who was in their 20s who took out, a kidney to go to this festival would go to Ocean Drive or go to some car dealer and rent a Lambo, go down Ocean Drive, music blasting, revving the engine, going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
But it's the feeling of it that got it there. And it's like you said, my kind of moment of change was seeing all of this nonsense and realizing that every other month I'm going to get Diana fixed. I got the green lights to go to the Netherlands, and I was like, all right, this has to stop. Yeah. What can I do to get into that world? And like you said, with your moment of change, so to speak, that was really California, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah. And it was also understanding the things that I kind of learnt about them were the political influence of the oil industry, which is, which you kind of, it's very hard to see it because it's been happening from long before we were born.
Yeah.
We're talking about 1800s, 1890, 1910. That's when the oil industry started to kind of influence our governments and their impact on the countries that they went to. So the full history of a company like Shell or British Petroleum is staggering. It is the brutality of it is breathtaking. And I mean, I'm not saying they're like that now, but their history is really, it's dripping in blood. It's as bad as the British Empire and slavery and murder and taking over. I mean, they just did not care. If you were in the way of them extracting oil, they killed you. It was as simple as that. If that was your land and they wanted oil on it, you're just dead. You either leave or you're. I mean, they wouldn't kill you. They'd pay someone else to do it. Yeah, really, really brutal history. It is shocking. But I mean, that's the case for many things. I mean, that's happened in lots of gold, diamonds. There's a long history of human brutality, greed, and stupidity. There's nothing. It's nothing specific.
Anything of value. Yeah.
Anything of value. Yeah. But I mean, that side of it. And then I thought, and it was really when I first went in an electric car, which was that? I guess that was in the States. And I still didn't think that was an answer, but I was slightly intrigued by it. But I just thought, why would you make a car that sounds like a vacuum cleaner? And what's the point, And it doesn't go very far, and all those things. And then I got one. I was given made some public statement about it or something that we needed to think. I can't even remember how it happened. It was a long time ago. But I was given a little electric car, Japanese, Mitsubishi i-MiEV, it was called. In 2009 for a year. It was part of a government research program where they would see how often you charge. So you had to have meters put in your house and you plug it in and how much electricity do you really use and how far do you really drive and all that. It was all kind of measured. And I think there were 60 of these cars in the UK spread around different places. And it was driving that regularly. I went, this is fine. And this was, by today's standards, the most compromised crap electric car you can imagine. I mean, if in the summer you could maybe get 70 miles out of it on a charge.
Wow.
In the winter, more like 50. But actually, what you realize after a while is I drove over 12,000 miles in a year. So I used it all the time. And a huge amount of your journeys, which I'd never thought about before, they're only, even where we live, and we're in quite a remote area for the UK, 12, 15, 20 miles. That's the average you do in a day. And that's going shopping, picking up the kids from school, taking them to swimming, whatever, all the things I was doing then with younger children. And I just went, and then at the end of that year, working out how much that cost, because they did all that. They registered how much electricity I'd put in the car, how much it cost. And there was nowhere else to charge it other than at my house. So I paid for all the electricity at my house. There was no public charging infrastructure. And it was so much cheaper. It was working out at under a penny a mile, even then.
Wow.
To drive that car. This is in 2009. It would be more now, but it still was. And I went, that is remarkable. That really kind of changed my whole attitude to it. The one downside, well, there's a few downsides, but one of them was at that time I had a diesel Land Rover Defender, really battered, really kind of mashed up. It had a very tough life. It had been a crew car on the TV series I did, which meant it was driven by 21-year-olds in a like an old quarry or a rubbish tip, and they would see if it could jump in the. They really trashed it. And I had to go shopping on the way home to buy some pasta for my children. That was the kind of contrast. Anyway, there was a time when the ignition battery in the Mitsubishi went flat because my children left the doors open and all the interior lights were on. Normal. That's just a normal thing. So I had to jump start a super eco clean electric car with the dirtiest diesel. I had to jump start. The diesel was going with this black cloud of smoke coming off it to give me enough power to start an electric car to be ethical and clean. So that was a good bit of but the other one was, and this is, he wouldn't say this now. He's moved on. He's a mature 28-year-old. But I took the car out of our little garage at home, and we live in a rural area. It's very muddy in the winter. Every car's just covered in mud. And my wife was waiting to get in the passenger side, and that was parked up against the wall so I could charge it. Right. And when I came out of the garage, she said, "Oh, God, come and look at this." And I thought I'd bashed it up or scratched it. And I walked round, and on the passenger door, on the passenger side, it said, "Totally gay car." That my son had written. He was about 14 at the time. But we both stood it, and I went, "Oh, isn't that wonderful?" And we were both so proud because he'd spelt totally correctly. But I'd been driving around in this car probably for 2 or 3 weeks. No, I just didn't see it. So I was driving around in a car that just said "totally gay car" on the side. But he meant gay in the terms of that generation using the word gay. He's got,
of course, yeah.
I just want to clarify that. He's moved on.
Oh my gosh! Oh.
He did a lot worse to me, my son, than that.
Yeah. This is bottom of the barrel stuff. Me being the oldest of 3, I definitely have my share of stories.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, you made that transition. You kind of saw the benefits that came with with EVs as a whole, and your flight path to getting into that community kind of grew from there. Yeah. But once you started getting into it, obviously you didn't have too many fans on the familial side, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
But how was it when you interact with other people about your Prius or one of your?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Well, my brother was horrified. You can imagine. I mean, to him, it was like a crime. It was like a sort of. It was like going against a god. It was really profound. That's the worst thing you could possibly do is go in an electric car. He completely changed his mind when he had to go in my Tesla, but that was a few years later. But, there was, enormous negativity around about it. I mean, particularly in the press and on TV. And then, so I would just be at the supermarket and I'd get out of the car in a car park, and a sort of man would just walk past shaking his head, going, "Well, I mean, you've got to throw the batteries away." They would just say that as they walk past. And I go, "Oh, what?" And I'd be sort of silly. I go, "What now? Do I need to throw them away now? Can I get home first before I throw them away?" And someone would walk past and say, "Has it burst into flames yet?" And it just endlessly like that. And how long does it take to charge? And I said, "Oh, months." I said, I've been waiting a month to come to the shop. That's how long I've been waiting. My family are starving to death because there's no food. So I didn't really help things. But it was just that constant level of absurd stuff, which is then, that's in a way what inspired me to do the Fully Charged show, was to kind of go, well, there's lots of things wrong with electric cars. I've always said that. They're not the answer. They're not going to solve the world's problems, but they are not as bad. One, they're not as bad as the press and the general assumption makes out. And two, they are. I do think that it's a better technology than internal combustion engines. And I think as I then sort of kind of came to understand how the world works regarding energy. And I mean, there was one thing, there was a key moment that I haven't mentioned, which was when I was doing another TV show, a regular broadcast TV show called How Do They Do It? I spent 2 days at the biggest oil refinery in the UK, which was amazing. I loved it. I mean, it was fascinating. It's incredible scale of engineering, ingenuity and energy and just noise and vibration and heat. It's just mind-boggling, the scale of it. And that one refinery produces all the jet fuel that we use in the UK. So every time a plane lands here and refuels, it's all come from there. It produces huge amounts of diesel and gasoline and pharmaceuticals and oils and tarmac, everything, all that stuff. But my God, it has a big impact on the world. When you see that and you go, wait a minute, this is before anyone's used that fuel. This is like, and then you see the ships coming in. We watched a tanker come in from Saudi Arabia that was, I'd never seen one up close. They are big.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
They are really big. They are just huge. And this is a big, natural port, not natural dock, I guess, a water in Pembrokeshire in Wales. And these things, even in that like a big body of water, and then you sort of see the whole thing fill up as this ship comes in. It's just like, oh my God. And that's carrying millions of barrels of oil that we pay for, that the money that leaves our economy goes to Saudi Arabia, which, I've met loads of Saudi people and they are amazing, lovely people. But I think it's fair to say the Saudi regime, the government and the royal family, probably less than benign.
To some degree.
Yeah. I don't want to get specific in my criticism, but
we are recording.
pretty medieval, but I can say that. But that aspect of it, then I went, God, this is, and then the absolute last key thing that really convinced me. So then a couple of years later, I got a Nissan Leaf, which I still have. Nice. And there's loads of compromised problems with it, particularly with the early Nissan Leafs, which I have, but they work, and it's always worked. It still works. My daughter now uses it. But there was a day where I managed to charge it from the solar panels on my roof and fill it was a very sunny day in the summer, and I produced 24 kilowatt hours. I produced about 35 kilowatt hours of electricity from the solar panels. 24 kilowatt hours went in the car. I drove that car to see a friend that I met who has a watermill, an really old watermill, an Anglo-Saxon watermill that he's converted to generate electricity. I charged the car from that at his house. I had to be there for quite a long time because the Nissan Leaf does not charge quickly. But all the electricity that I used came from rain, in that case, or sun when I was here. And I just went, and when I got back home, I went, that is a technological shift that is important, because nothing was imported to fuel that car, to make the car and to make the solar panels. Yes, even the water turbine in that a watermill was made in Germany, so that had to be brought here on a truck that burns diesel. Because I'm very used to all those accusations of hypocrisy. What about the diesel? Yes, it did burn diesel to bring the watermill here. What about when a crane made it there? Yes, the crane was running on diesel. But now it isn't using diesel. It's still running now. He has to turn that watermill off for an hour a year for maintenance.
Wow.
And it produces all the electricity for a little village, about 14, 15 houses. And it produces all their electricity 24 hours a day, all year round. And when you see that, you go, there is some stuff we can do here. And you drive a car. Then I did that journey would have been 170 miles there and back. And I didn't have, no fuel was imported and refined, and it was even transported very far. The electricity went down 5 meters of wire at my house, and it went along about 3 meters of wire at his mill. So it was super efficient. And I just thought that is really hard to achieve. I was really compromised. I had to wait hours at his house. I had dinner there. I went for a walk, and I just about made it back home. All those things were, put into the mix. But there's no way I could do that. I'd have to have my own oil drilling rig and refinery at my house.
Yeah,
which I think I'd have. We have quite tight planning laws in the UK. I think I'd have trouble getting that passed.
For sure. Yeah. You got to call your Saudi friends, see if they can.
Yeah. Dear Gloucestershire Council, a Saudi friend of mine wants to open an oil refinery. Is that okay in the village?
I'm more asking for forgiveness than permission at that point.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so awesome. And like you said, once you had that kind of marvel or that realism, oh shit, it's really a technological advancement.
Yeah.
It has everything that I want, and you kind of blocked off the haters, so to speak, or kind of clapped back at some of the things that they said. What route did you do to get your first EV? You bought your first EV, right?
Yeah, I bought that one. So that was, and I was, I was lucky. It was a press car. So Nissan lent it to me, and I just said, I don't want to give it back. So I did get it cheaper, but it's still, because it was so expensive. I can't remember what I paid for. A lot of money. Yeah, one of the most expensive cars I've ever bought. But they did. I definitely got it cheap. I think the list price was like £35,000, 37,000. Crazy expense. And I think I got it for 28 or something like that. So I got a reduction, but it was still a hell of a lot of money. And thankful. But I've decided I'm going to keep it. Whatever. It's now like a proper secondhand car. It's got dents and scratches. It's got all kinds of damage done to it. But functionally, it's perfectly all right. My daughter drives it every day at work, and she worked out how to charge it, and she loves it. She even washed it. She's washed it once in a year and a half. Doesn't wash it a lot.
The one time counts.
Yeah. Sure. But so that is a good example of it. And that actually, whenever that was, just before the lockdown, I took it to Amsterdam to have a new battery put in, because the battery was always terrible. Because the sort of joke about the Nissan Leaf was, oh, well, the battery's range is bad. Yeah, it was terrible when it was new, and it got slightly worse. Not that much worse, but it was already bad. So it's now got it's got a 40 kilowatt hour battery, in which it has transformed it. And now it does. Well, she did 128 miles on one charge the other day, which is unimaginable in that Nissan Leaf. It would do 55, 60 really.
Yeah, on like a nice spring summer
on a lovely summer's day in the Netherlands with a following wind.
Yeah, which is like maybe 2 days a year here. So.
But it is true. I have always achieved the highest energy efficiency in the Netherlands when I drive across the Netherlands. It's amazing the difference that makes. If there aren't, it's just because we live in quite a hilly area, so there's nowhere I can go without going up or down a hill.
Yeah, and I mean here you're flat and under the sea level, so you're super too in that regard.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask about, like, the reason I'm so curious about the pricing is from my side, right? I hear about buying, leasing, maybe car sharing, and I'm bougie to an extent, right? Like, I want some cool features. If I go the EV route, I want maybe the auto assist driving and some of that, but I'm balling on a budget.
Yes.
So once I sell Diana, which she's maybe going to get me like a nice slap on the wrist or some chump change plus some savings, what is my best route to go for the EV? I've heard it's not buying.
I think it's not buying.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, I just think, because I don't, the Leaf was the only car I owned. So we have a VW ID4 and a Tesla Model 3, but they're leased. And, so I think of them as rented. We just rent cars, which is not cheap, but it's, and it's the kind of, it just removes the whole thing about, I've got to find someone to buy it if I'm going to sell it, or what do I do with it? Or, so I have to look after them. I have to have them serviced and do all that stuff. Right. But there are now, and I think this is really going to grow fast. There are leasing companies, but there are also subscription companies. So mobility subscription, mobility as a service, mobility as a mass, MAAS. And when there's loads of variants. In fact, I interviewed someone yesterday who's running a company like that, and I just thought that makes so much more sense. There's very short commitment, so you don't have to sign a 3-year lease; it's a month. So particularly like in your section, let's say, well, look, I'll try an electric car for a month and see if it's a hassle parking it and charging it. But I don't have to make the commitment of, so you can do it for a month. There's no penalties. And their scheme, it's the insurance, the servicing, you get an app and a card, which means you can access like 90% of the charges. So you don't even have to go through that hassle.
Yeah.
And also they deliver it to your house and they explain how to use it. So that you go, well, that is pretty attractive. And that costs more per month than a kind of 4-year lease of limited mileage. But it's unlimited mileage, and it's, there's a lot of pluses for it, because it includes so many other aspects. And you just think that strikes me a good idea. The other one that I saw, which I just went, if I lived here, I'd do that. I wouldn't have a car, which was in Utrecht. We did an episode about the car sharing in Utrecht. Mm-hmm. And there's so many cars. For a start, they're all over the city. They all have dedicated parking spaces with chargers, so they're always charged up. We went to a big underground garage parking lot which has like dozens of Teslas. I couldn't even count, just all down one, with all with chargers. And you can book them online really easily. And we talked to two families, a mum and a dad with one family and a mum from another, who were, university graduate, upper middle class, wealthy, had a lovely house in the middle of Utrecht, not poor people, quite rich people, one of whom had a Range Rover, which they sold because they said the experience of using this car service is better than having your own car, because they don't have any of the hassle and the nightmare of the car. And also, you now can't drive a Range Rover in Utrecht. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But they've got a car, like right outside their house, there's a car plugged into the street, which normally they had to walk 400 meters to get to where they could park their car. So it's actually a better experience for them. They can also get a bigger electric car with car seats in the back for their kids and all those. There's a lot of, detail in it like that. And I thought, if I lived in Utrecht, I wouldn't have because you use the bike anyway, or you use the brilliant tram service or the railways. There's so many alternatives particularly the Netherlands is, blessed, as you know, with like actual functioning public transport and actual cycle paths that actually work. So it's a very different experience, isn't it? But I mean, it just strikes me as what I'm hoping is that your generation, it's kind of moves on from private car ownership, because it's all those things I never thought about in like 40 years of driving cars, is that I only used the car 5 or 10% of the time I owned it.
Yeah.
Which is that's like dumb. Like if you had a house that you only used, that's a billionaire who's got a house in Ibiza and another one in Moscow, and they only use it for one day a year. Well, that's all right for you, mate. But crazy. It's so inefficient. Like if an aircraft company, an airline used their planes 5% of the time, they'd be bankrupt in the first 10 minutes. So that strikes me as being hugely wasteful. And it's when you kind of go through that process with people who are running big car sharing schemes, a brilliant one in Berlin as well, we've seen, you realize that the number of cars needed in a city for everyone in that city to have the same experience as they have with their own car, the numbers are down by 80%. You just the streets, we would reclaim the streets. They wouldn't be full of big parked cars, which take up a lot of space. And so that stuff, I think my generation is hopeless. They're never going to change. But I'm sort of hoping that the next generation will go, I don't really need to own the car.
Yeah. And
particularly if you can then, when you go to a weird American youth event that you were describing, but then you rent a bloody Lamborghini and you go around in that for the day, and that's fine. Well, who cares? I don't care about that. It's brilliant. Rev it to death.
Yeah, get your fill in while you have it.
Fill in while you can, because do you really need to own a car that costs $750,000? Kind of dumb.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I even saw that in the UK, there's this website. It's called e-Car Club, I think it is.
Right.
And on their website, they even encourage younger people to drive it. It's one of like their KPIs even.
Yes.
Which is awesome, because like you said, I mean, talking to people from different regions in the Netherlands, it's as easy as walking down the street, looking at your phone,
and
like
just
getting a boat scooter, anything like that.
Yeah.
But
all that
I
stuff
love
is great, and I think it is generational. I mean, my son does have a car at the moment, but he's about to sell it and he uses car sharing. He's got his own car, and he realized it's so rubbish because it's like a really old, broken down thing. It's always breaking. That he can actually use either car sharing. He lives in Bristol, just down the road from me, and also he uses the company cars, which are electric, which he loves using. And when he's at work, he can use those. So, and I think that the really big change I think that's happened in this country, and I think it is happening in most European countries, is the public attitude. Even if people don't have an electric car now, the number of people who say, well, the next time I change and when I get a new car, I want it to be electric. That is now the majority of people are saying that, even if and there's huge barriers to that because there's shortages and all the rest of it.
Of course.
But I think the public acceptance of electric cars in comparison with, say, 10 years ago is absolutely transformed. It's totally different.
So for people like me, again, in this scope of, okay, I'm on the fence, I want to transfer into the EV world, with the shortages and things like that, maybe my perception's there, but I can barely remember to pay my Netflix subscription. How am I going to remember that in 2 years if I go for this car and may be available for me,
Yeah, it is. I mean, that side of it is, I think, a really big challenge. But at the moment, that affects a huge amount of manufactured things. I mean, it's not just electric cars, definitely it's cars in general.
Right.
There is that whole problem, and I think the price of energy going up to the levels that it is also a challenge, but that affects gasoline cars as well. I mean, I think what's going to happen is the really stark difference in running costs between electric and petrol will shrink. I think electric ones are going to still be cheaper to run, generally, but not as much. But then if you are in a position and I'm very privileged to do that, but have done it for many years. I've been working on it for many years, but I have an enormous amount of solar and batteries in my house. So I have now not used any electricity from the grid. I'm coming up to, I think I'm either the 44th or the 45th day of using zero grid electricity, and I'm charging 2 cars and running a house. But that is unusual, but it's unusual now, but it's not impossible. Yeah, and I think that's a critically important, and it's a huge, if the more people that can do that, the better. And I mean, that applies all across Europe. And I mean, certainly the 2 companies I know that install solar and batteries cannot possibly do the amount of work they've been asked to do. I mean, that is a thing that's just gone through the roof in this country because of the coming cataclysmic rise in costs. You just think anything I can do to mitigate that is a plus. But that, I think the side technologies that are developing, so things like you can run your house from your car, you use the car as a mobile battery. That there was a very good example of that in the last Super Bowl TV commercial that Ford did of the F-150 Lightning. The thing that sparked the most interest was the fact that there was a shot of the guy drives his big truck into his house, plugs it in, goes in the house. Then you see the cityscape behind him. There's a power cut and all the lights go out, and his lights go out, and he opens his app and goes blip, and his lights come back on because he's running. And a guy I saw a talk from people at Ford, and one of the guys said, we reckon that sold us 100,000 F-150 Lightnings. That the orders just, and it wasn't so much it can go off road or it can pull this or it's powerful. It's like, man, I can run my house and be independent. It was those guys. It wasn't the kind of coastal liberal, let's drive a green car. It wasn't that. It was the dude. Can the Ford F-150 still fit a gun rack in the back? Yes, it can, sir.
Oh man, we all know that one person when you're like, all right, you go for it, man. Like,
I've got to tell you, when I worked in California, the biggest pickup truck, I think it was a Ford. I don't even know what it was, but it had double tires at the back. It was really monstrous, and we could hear it coming. And it was this amazing guy, and I wish I could remember his name, a black dude who lived in LA and had the headscarf. He terrified me the first time I met him because all the stereotypes I'd seen in movies. He was the gentlest, most polite guy. He always called me sir, but he had a sound system in his car that moved your hair. He did say to me, I'm going to try and do his accent. I can't do it. My sound system can move Caucasian hair. That's what he said. And I set it, and I put in ear protectors. He made me do it, and then he turned it up,
Oh, wow.
and I felt my hair going. That's how loud.
So it was study tested and proven. That
Yeah, and it was a massive truck, and he said he needed it to move his jet ski because his sound equipment was the size of a kid's school bag. It wasn't that big.
Yeah. Wow, man,
Yeah,
that's nuts. Oh my gosh.
I just love that. It moves Caucasian hair. Doesn't move African
That's a
hair.
tagline for sure.
Yeah. I can move Caucasian hair.
And like you said, I mean, now that there are the F-150s of the world, I know that even they have that EV Hummer that they showed LeBron in that commercial. Yeah, they're everywhere. So it's very appealing to every group. Doesn't matter now. I think, like you said, the industry itself is kind of catching up.
Yeah.
And from my side, like you said, on that regard, at least I still have the options to experience the EV world without going as far as buying or renting.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is a big change, and I think it is that. I think it's become my sort of driving motivation is more to change our relationship with cars rather than the actual cars themselves. It's like, in a way, the technological challenges of electric cars from, say, 10 years ago, they've just gone. It's just not interesting. Yes, they have the range. Don't worry about it. The battery isn't going to fall out and wear out in 2 years. All those things. That's boring. It's the psychology and also our kind of relationship. And our relationship with cars, absolutely from the North American experience, from the United States. That's where cars emerged as mass market things. That's built cities around them in a sense. So that's the problem that we have in Europe, is that we didn't build cities around cars. We've jammed cars into them. Sort of smashed, come on, I can fit more cars in this narrow, winding medieval lane. I can get more cars in there. Absolutely not built for cars, our cities. And and I remember the first time I had a Tesla Model S here, and where I live, I can't turn right out of my house in a Tesla Model S because the road is so narrow. Both wing mirrors get folded in by the hedge, because it's a big American car. But then I went to LA, was filming something there, and someone lent me a Tesla, and I drove to a restaurant, and I went, this is like a compact. This is like a tiny Golf.
Yes.
Because I parked in between a truck that could basically pull a ship along the Panama Canal if it needed to, and some other monster thing. And that little Tesla, it was tiny. It was so easy to park it. So yeah, it is a very different experience, and I think that is the huge challenge for the American market. Is you've got to have a car with long range that has a charging network, which is what you've got to hand it to them. It's what Tesla have done amazingly successfully, and a reliable, robust charging network that actually works. That's it is frustrating that it's frustrating from the point of view of everybody else that they've done that and it does work. And so I'm always struggling not to be a Tesla fanboy until I drive. But I'll drive to Italy in a Tesla, and it's a non-event in terms of charging. It just is not. That's not the problem. It's, where do I have a piss? Can I buy a baguette? Can we get some water? I'm really thirsty. Those are the problems. The charging is like, whatever, just charge it. It's very, very easy.
And it's like you said. I mean, I think everybody is tired of the Elon Musk and Tesla fanboys, but you can't deny it. And that's
amazing.
You actually beat me to my segue about the whole charging thing, because let's say I'm car sharing, I'm leasing, I'm renting, whatever. I have an EV accessible to me.
Yeah,
and my first step is, okay, what the hell do I do now? I've seen people plug it in their outlet. I've seen people plug it in their, the car charging ports. But I think groups like Tesla really make it so easy for you to kind of figure it out. And that's kind of leading me to my question. Like, when you first got your EV, were you like, the hell do I do with this? Is it just a plug in the wall? Do I, and then when fast charging came in, what do I do with that? Does that actually work in my area? So what kind of, I guess, bigger questions?
It is a big. I mean, just quickly, while we're talking about the Netherlands, Fastned in the Netherlands is like one of my favorite charging networks, because it's at every service area on all the freeways, and they all work, and they work really well, and they're undercover. That's that's what you want when you stop at a charger in an electric car and you plug it in and it doesn't work. You want to storm the Capitol building with a big flag. That's what I want to wear battle fatigues, be slightly overweight, just shout some bad shit. But no, it's really, really annoying. That is really annoying. And so when you come across something like FastNed, where their reliability is extraordinary and their ease of use, you plug the car in, it starts charging, then you find the app, and then you realize, you don't need it. You've done it once. Once you've done it once, it just knows. It just does it. So that's what we should always have, which is the same as a Tesla. The Tesla, the charger recognizes the car and you pay through the car, and it's so easy to do. It's so easy. But early on, it was incredibly frustrating and difficult because the actual technology was unreliable. So the old chargers would get confused, and and also it's a side of charging that I think the general public don't know is somebody can put in a charger that's perfectly robust and sound, and it will charge car A, B, C, and D. But car E has got such crap software, and the people who built it haven't got a clue what they're doing. You plug that in, it doesn't work, and it throws the system out in the charger. It's not the charger that's wrong, it's the bloody car. And that happened a lot, but it's got better now. But that was often a problem. It was the car that wasn't doing the handshake correctly. And it needed someone of your age who can do software and has a laptop and not like me. It's like it was designed by someone of my age, where we're used to a cassette tape with code on it. And if a screen isn't green and hurts your eyes and has little green type, we don't know what it is. Really rubbish software. It's terrible. So that has changed and it has got better. But that experience has to be, I think it's the only genuinely useful thing I ever did regarding electric cars. I was asked to speak in front of a parliamentary committee in the Houses of Parliament in the UK about electric car chargers. And they asked me all sorts of questions, but what I basically said was, I want to be able to buy electricity for my car as easy as I can buy a can of soda, or a packet of crisps or whatever. Yeah. I don't want to join a club and be a member of a thing and I just want to pay for it and shut up and leave me alone. Don't ask me any questions. And drive on, so in this country they have legislated that now you can't put in a public rapid charger unless it has tap to pay. That is the law now. Okay. So all the new ones now are so easy to use. Just drive up, plug the car in, beep, and that's it. You don't do anything else. So that is a big step forward. So it has improved enormously. It has got better, but it is frustrating. It is a painful first step because essentially, if you've grown up in North America, Western Europe, anywhere, you've seen your mum or dad go to a petrol station, put the thing in the thing, go with the petrol, put the cap back on, put it back there, go and pay the person, come back, off you go. We all know that from our childhood. We've seen it ever since we were tiny. So you don't have to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering whether there is going to be a generation of kids who are now maybe 10 years old, 8-10 years old, who've never been in a petrol car. Their mums and dads have had electric ones and they know that you plug it in. I mean, I've seen a 3-year-old at a charger plug the charger in for her dad. And she can barely lift the damn thing. But she got it in. She knew how to do it.
Well, that definitely trumps all my concerns about figuring it out myself. If I watch somebody do that, I'm either
if you watch a 3-year-old, and also, you need to be shown how to do it. That is the other bad thing, and I think that is getting better. We met a woman at a charger a few years ago when we were filming something, and this woman came up to us and said, "Oh, I wish my car could charge on this fast, rapid charger." And I said, "Oh dear, that's a shame. What car have you got?" And she pointed to it, and I went, "I think you can." And that, "Oh no, you can't. It hasn't got the right thing." And I don't know if you, but the CCS charger, it has the round hole that you put the one in at home, and then it has the little thing underneath. You pull the cap off. They hadn't shown her that, so when I pulled the cap off, she almost cried. I did not believe it. I didn't know I had that. And we plugged her car in, and she charged it. And you go, that doesn't take that long to show her that. And she just bought that car new from a car dealership, and they hadn't shown her that. That's just.
That's nice. And I'm sure she went home and was like, "Yo, check this new feature out."
Yeah.
I've seen this before. Bam, I'm out. 20 minutes fast charging. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
And is the community like that as a whole? Like when you go to fast charging or charging stations, are people pretty susceptible to help you out?
I think so. I think they would be still. It's certainly early on, definitely, because none of us could work out how to do it. So you'd always get there, and there would generally be men my age with unusual facial hair. They'd be slightly tubby, white men. Big beard. Robert, I think you'll find you're using the wrong charge connector. They would have all the information. You're looking at a 64 kilowatt charge lead, and you can only accept 42. There'd be those sort of things. Lots of knowing men with unusual beards. But that's changed now, so it is very much more. But certainly I've occasionally helped, people who can't work out how to do it. But I think it's got a lot better. I think it's becoming more common knowledge, I think, generally.
Big time.
Yeah.
All right. And throughout your whole charging experience, like you said, you've had the good with Fastnet, but I'm sure you've had the weirdest charging spot. What's the weirdest, strangest place you've ever charged?
It was so annoying. So when there was a reason for doing it, but I think I can't remember how long ago. A long time ago, a journalist that I had met for the BBC drove from London to Edinburgh in an electric Mini. But this wasn't the electric Mini they make now. This was an experimental one. And he tried to charge it in various places. There wasn't anywhere to charge it. He did it before there was a charging network. And it took him 3 days to drive there. So, of course, you imagine the publicity that got. I drove an electric car from London to Edinburgh. It took me 3 days. It's a disaster. So it was. So about 2 years later, there was then rapid chargers all the way up the highway, all the way up the motorway up to Edinburgh that we knew about. So we drove up in my Nissan Leaf, and we had to stop every 60 miles and charge. But we only charged for like 15 minutes just to make sure we could get to the next one. And so that was great all the way up. It was absolutely faultless. It all worked fine until we got to it was dark, and we did it in the winter. It was so stupid. We got to a town in Scotland where we knew there was a charger, and it was put in by the local council, and it was pouring with rain, and we were driving around. We went in this car park. Well, it's meant to be here, and we drove all around the car park, rain tumbling, nothing. And then the guy I was with, who was an engineer, he rang the people he'd had contact with, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll come and show you where it is. Oh, great to meet you." And so about 10 minutes later, a truck turns up, and they beckon us, and we follow them right round the back of the library and the town hall and the public toilets and the garbage dump. I mean, right in the corner, jammed in the corner where there was a leaking gutter with water pouring out of it. And that was the rapid charger. I mean, you couldn't hide it better. It was, right. And what the bizarre thing was, we're going to be staying here the night. This is no way is this going to work. And we got there and put up an umbrella and then got the charger and and it worked. We go, I don't believe it. But that was the oddest, and it was so remote and dark and cold and wet. But what was lovely was the 2 guys that came and got us. We then went in their truck to their house, and we had a cup of tea and a special cake that they make in the borders of Scotland. It was lovely, and that was very nice. And by the time we got back to the car, it was full, and we drove to Edinburgh. So we got there. We did it in 19 hours. It took us to drive from London to Edinburgh, which is pretty bad. I could do it now in a Tesla, and you'd stop to have a wee once and charge it a bit and then go. You do it in the same as a petrol car, So that is the difference. But I think that is the weirdest one I can remember. The only other one that was very painful was in Australia. I drove a Tesla Model X, the one with the silly doors that come up.
Oh yeah, butterflies. Yeah.
The butterfly doors. And we were driving in Queensland, and they don't. This was about 5 years ago. There was I don't think anyone in Queensland had seen a Model X. It was a brand new one. And we drove a long way. It was really hot. And we got to the supercharger, which was in a macadamia nut farm that was also a children's adventure playground and a magic castle and an animal zoo and all kinds of weird. We wouldn't necessarily have gone there, but there was a supercharger. So we got to, and I was desperate for a piss. I mean, just like that. Managed to park it, plugged it in, and I was on my way to the loo. I could see that the loo, such an English word, the toilet, the restroom.
Yeah.
And Judy got her bag out the back. My wife got a bag out the back. So she opened one of the doors. Immediately, there was a crowd of people going, "Mate, what's that?" "Well, I've never seen a car like that. That's an amazing door. Tell us about it." "No, I can't talk. I can't." So I was trying to explain about charging electric cars and Tesla and the doors and all that while I was just in agony. It was murder, but I survived.
I can already feel the stress kicking in.
Oh, it was just the worst time, because that happens a lot when you're particularly in those. I mean, by then that was weird because by then, like in this country, no one would have given it a second look. They'd seen them all, but because it was very new there was yeah.
Oh man!
But the good thing about that car park was it was covered in solar panels. It had solar roof all over it, which was amazing.
That's pretty baller, yeah.
You should have that everywhere, yeah.
Oh man, we had a kind of couple test runs previously, and I had the same experience. We were talking about it. We had like 10 minutes left. I had a couple questions. I was like, yeah. Cool.
Keep the answer short.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap this one up. I'll call you if you need anything. Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, the thing is that the difference. I think this is age. I've talked to other old blokes like me that I'm like driving a car on a long journey. I'm not in any discomfort. I'm fine. I'm driving. Oh, should we stop here? Okay, let's charge here. Yeah. I get out of the car. I'm in agony instantly as soon as I stand up. It's like, while I was sitting in the car, nothing. I wasn't at all uncomfortable. I didn't even think about needing a wee. And then you get up. Oh my God, gotta go. I've decided it's like, like when you kink a garden hose. It's that. When you stand up, it unkinks.
Just straightens itself out. Like, oh shit. Out of everything we talked about, what would your like one-liner or go-to sentence to be to get people over that hump?
Wow. I think one of them, which I think is relevant, is that an electric car is fuel agnostic, and that's quite a hard thing to explain. But you got a gasoline car. What do you need to make it go? Gasoline. Yeah. What else? No, just gasoline. No, but surely you could. No, just gasoline. And an electric car, you use electricity. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It could be coal, nuclear, wind, solar, tidal, gas, anything. Anything will make that car work. It doesn't care where it's from, which means that it can run on very clean electricity. It can run on dirty electricity just as well, but it can run on clean electricity, which means we've got the choice. Where you don't have the choice with a gasoline car, it's got to run on gasoline. And I mean, biofuels, I think we can now accept is an absolute environmental, humane disaster. What are we going to do when there's all these hungry people? Let's grow loads of crops to make fuel that we can burn. No, maybe we should grow food. But anyway, so I mean, I think that it's a difficult one because it's not a kind of instant, party weekend playing loud rock and roll. But you can play very loud rock and roll in an electric car. It still works.
And even shake some Caucasian people's hair sometimes.
You could possibly move a great deal of Caucasian hair in an electric car.
I think that's the one-liner right there. Like, hey, you never wanted to move.
This was difficult to understand now. It was long enough ago for me to have some Caucasian hair. Because now it would be very hard to move my hair now without, I don't know what you'd have to use.
Oh, man. Robert, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with me. This is awesome.